This is strictly political, or we'll say 90% political. And I think the most important thing that I want to name here, it's kind of dovetailing on Steve Grumbine's live stream from earlier today. And what I would conceptualize what he's talking about is pivots, making pivots that are necessary, and being able to, dance, be on your toes. So for me, I think that what's really important here is to look at your own personal narrative in terms of political involvement and trying to determine for yourself what is real. And it changes quite a bit. So without going into a long drab, well, it's actually kind of interesting to me, but discussion regarding my personal pivots on, going back to 1992, maybe even in the late 80s when I started to become politically involved in high school. But I think that we just talk about it in terms of 2015 until now. So when Hillary Clinton was coronated, maybe in 2014 or maybe it was 2012, we don't really know for sure. I didn't even know who Bernie Sanders was. And when Bernie Sanders, I remember very clearly seeing that first talk he gave. It was abysmal, It was a great talk, but it was attended by 12 people. And so, but I was very interested in his message. I'm very intrigued. And I'd heard about Bernie Sanders. A lot of people hadn't even heard. I knew who he was. He's a socialist senator from Vermont. I didn't know about, him marching with Martin Luther King. And then his career of activism was very strong leading up to, that moment in time. At any rate, I was a Hillary backer. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, this is going to be great. It's going to be an extension of the Obama era policies. People are doing really well. a lot of confusion. If I'm doing okay, then everybody must be doing okay, which I think is part of the broader narrative of neoliberal Democrats in particular, or neoliberals in general, is if I'm doing okay financially, everyone else must be doing okay financially. And if you're not, then the fallacy of meritocracy, meaning you just got to work harder, you got to pick yourself up by the bootstraps, holds. So to me, I was gaslighted, and I didn't even know what neoliberalism was. And it wasn't for another 2 years that I actually became aware of what that term meant. So as the months went on, going into the fall of 2015, and I saw the Bernie crowds get bigger, 3,000, 5,000, 10,000 people in attendance and so forth, I started to realize, wow, this guy's a very different kind of message. And I really quickly pivoted. That's the point. I pivoted away from Hillary Clinton, and I could see a very strong distinction between their stated platforms and their demeanors. And I think that what most people were drawn to with Bernie was both his message and his general persona, that he embodied what it was he was talking about. It wasn't some kind of weird political, do Hillary Clinton, and no, this kind of speech pattern that politicians adopt. Bernie was red in the face, his collar was open, he was out there screaming at crowds of 50, initially, and then 100 and 1,000, 5,000, and then we later saw 30,000 people in different cities and so forth. I abandoned the Hillary Clinton bandwagon, and I started to see actually that Bernie Sanders was a legitimate human being. It's quite contrasting to everything I've experienced in terms of federal office holders my whole life. And I became kind of pissed off. I was like, what kind of, because I'm a psychologist, so psychotherapist. I like to look at what's going on here. How is it that Hillary Clinton is seemingly being coronated what happened? Did she make a deal with Barack Obama? Was there something that happened there in 2012 or 2008? Was it like, I'll give you Secretary of State and then I'll make sure you're president in 2016? I started to become really skeptical and cynical. At any rate, I started to hate her. I think a lot of people in the progressive movement started to hate her. In fact, that was, to me, the Occupy movement was a little bit anemic, to be honest, in my opinion. There wasn't the effectiveness in terms of the changes that I'd hoped for. I was very much in support of what they were trying to accomplish in the few years beforehand, but I didn't see it coming to a head until Bernie Sanders started to go out there and talk about the oligarchy and the policies that needed to happen in order to redistribute wealth and, you know, to create prosperity for, you know, the greater good of America and the globe as well. And so, at any rate, going into, and I want to go a little bit faster here. So as I saw Bernie robbed in the coin toss in Iowa, and I was like, there's some shit going on here. And then I saw, you know, people really up in arms about what happened in Nevada. I started to think, well, he can win, but he's going against some kind of chicanery, some kind of cheating going on. At any rate, I was actually optimistic and hopeful going into the summer of 2016 that he was actually going to win. It was going to be a landslide victory against Donald Trump. He was going to win by a margin of 16 percentage points in the Electoral College and the popular vote. And that's kind of what everything was going on there, was leading up to. And it really didn't have to do with the superdelegates. It had to do with the DNC in general. And we all saw what happened with WikiLeaks and all that kind of stuff. So if you're like me, you became livid, became really, really pissed off at what was going on and what you were witnessing in real time. If you're a neoliberal or a sycophant, vote blue sycophant, you didn't really care. It's like anything but Donald Trump. And so the next pivot I made after the convention and was feeling, I didn't get the anger, I didn't feel the rage at Bernie that a lot of people felt. I honestly didn't. I was like, well, he's got to do what he's got to do. That's my perspective. I own that, and I don't think anybody else has to feel that way. I was like, he's going to play politics. He's going to stay there, you know, and if Hillary Clinton loses to Donald Trump, he'll end up pushing the progressive message. I think he's genuine about the political revolution. He isn't going to retire from the Senate, so he's going to continue forth. He may be relatively hamstringed or anemic in that process. Who knows? So that's where I was at that point. And then Jill Stein says, I'll let you run at the head of the Green ticket. She knew he could win. So I was like, why didn't you take it, Bernie? So I became pissed off at him that he didn't take Jill Stein up on her offer. But I wasn't livid at him. I was like, okay, it's a calculated decision. Still trust what's going on with you. We'll see what's going to happen. And I don't really know what happened in the general election. I don't think we'll ever really learn. The idea that the Russians helped Jill Stein and that the Russians forget the whole thing with Russians supporting Donald Trump for a minute. I'm not going to get into that. Everybody talks about that. But I supported Jill Stein because she had the same exact platform as Bernie Sanders, just with the word green in front of it, you know? And I was like, that's great. And maybe the Greens can garner enough support that they can have a national stage in federal elections moving forward, and the Greens can debate and basically call out the duopoly. To me, that was really important. I knew that Jill Stein wouldn't win, but I thought that she could call out the duopoly. And, you know, in 2020 or in 2019 to 2020. But for whatever reason, and I think it was actually some rigging that went on there, she didn't get the 5%, and so she won't get matching funds, and the Green Party won't get matching funds going into 2020. So I was demoralized by that. I was like, that you can't even, and I think she actually did. I actually think in the true count would show that she was around 5, 7, 8%, etc. So to me, that was very important, and it was a loss. And then we saw Bernie throw his full weight behind Hillary Clinton, or the Democratic Party actually, after Donald Trump won. And that really infuriated me. With 14 million people Dem exiting, I thought, Bernie, you're so out of touch. With Nick Branya, supplicating him and being like, please form a third party, please do it. And I still, support Nick Branya in his efforts. And I think that was a really powerful thing. And he did his research on the formation of the, what was then the Republican Party and the ending of the Whig Party. And I was hoping that the Democratic Party would go that direction. Well, a lot of things, different things didn't happen, and it doesn't look like that's going to happen in this cycle. And it's not going to happen in this cycle, but it could happen in the future. But for now, at this point, at this moment right there, in the spring of 2017, what I saw Bernie doing, what I thought he was doing, was sheepdogging. I was like, you motherfucker, you're sheepdogging us into a party that betrayed you, and you're pushing this false narrative of, the Russia thing. And what the hell is that all about? I thought you were anti-war, and all the things that you're doing are going to lead us into armed conflict against the Russians in Syria over a frack line. You motherfucker. That's how I felt towards Bernie. So I felt betrayed by him, and I definitely was just Dem exit for life. I even would hashtag things, Dem exit for life. So over the next couple of years, what I witnessed with Bernie Sanders is he's held town halls, he's stayed on message, and a lot of people, have been really dismissive and have just seen this essentially as, sorry about that, as a way for Bernie Sanders to either fluff up his ego and maintain relevance. I never felt really that. Maybe he made a deal with the Democratic Party to save his grandchildren from being murdered. I wasn't really sold on that, although I think there's some kind of threat that happened to Bernie Sanders over time. Maybe it was like, we're going to hamstring your whole career. Who knows? But whatever, whether they let him loose or whether he's just his own man, he continued to stay on message. And you remember those West Virginia talks with these really, really red state people looking at him and being like, you can have universal health care? I would totally support that. I think all Americans are entitled to a job, or whatever the particular policies that he was alluding to. He was able to reach people. And so I continued to stay relatively warm to him, albeit cold to the Democratic Party, while Jared Beck and Elizabeth Beck were litigating it and ended up winning in court and losing the lawsuit. It really made me sour on the Democratic Party. But my next pivot is move on from that. What is realistic? What is relevant? And so I continued to look at what Nick Branya was doing. I saw some victories locally with the Democratic Socialist movement. But really feeling like, who is going to lead the charge? So I'm going to spare you on all the details of it and just say that at this moment in time, in the last couple of months, when, Bernie Sanders, when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez started to push very hard for a Green New Deal, and I knew who her advisors were, and I knew who the people were who were supporting a federal job guarantee, and I knew that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was a legitimate person, in the same vein as Bernie, albeit 50 years younger. Then I started to get more interested in politics, besides the economic aspect. Who's going to win? Who's a winner? And so, people threw their hats in the ring, Beto O'Rourke and different people. But when Bernie announced his candidacy, I was very excited. And then I started to watch, and this is very recent here, the first couple of town halls, or whatever you want to call them, these talks in Iowa, New Hampshire, now Nevada. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, this message has become very broad, very inclusive, and very strong. And it's way more progressive even than the initial message in 2016. And his first policy named as a federal job guarantee. So I don't know if that's actually a well, if that was a nod to Stephanie Kelton, or whether he felt like he could talk about this in terms of taxation, which of course is not true, but whether he could push that policy forward. So this is where I want to, agree with Steve Grumbine, and I feel very strongly that he's in the right about this. Is this idea that, fuck the whole duopoly is not relevant at this moment in time. It's not a relevant thing. You can just sit there and, pee in your diaper and say, I'm going to vote green no matter who. I'm like, no, that was relevant to me. That was relevant to me in 2016, because at least the Green Party has good hearts. They're good-hearted people. But at this point, just being so against the duopoly in terms of the Democratic Party is cutting off your nose to spite your face. That's hugely problematic for me, and I won't support that. I think it's self-destructive, and I think it's completely unrealistic. I don't give a shit whether, and I really have a strong opinion on this, and you can agree or disagree. But I think at this point, at this moment in time, Bernie Sanders, depending on the polls, is polling at 44% against a field of 6 or 7 or 8 other candidates. And I think that's incredibly important to know, is that that's a huge majority versus, people who are taking, Kamala Harris is taking 8% or 11% at most. If Bernie Sanders, we know his platform, and if you don't know his platform, just go to his website. And if you want to know about the monetary operations and the macroeconomic perspective about why it would work and why it will work and why it won't lead to hyperinflation and why we won't end up like Weimar Germany, go ahead and study all the modern monetary theorists. But for now, just realize that he's taking it at a very calculated level, and that there are all the policies that he's supporting have majorities, and many of them have supermajorities behind them with the polling data. So if you're not thinking about who's going to win this election, I think it's really silly, it's really foolish and really childish. If you're thinking, I'm going to vote for Jill Stein against Bernie Sanders, that's a spoiler effect. That'd be fucking stupid in my opinion. So to me, I still hate the Democratic Party. I still think it's horrible. And I look at the field he's going against, with some exceptions, they're all corporate, So they're neoliberals. So I want to end here, and I just want to say that as you're watching this, please consider temporarily, provisionally, if you need to, if you're required to in your particular state, register as a Democrat. If you're not, if you don't have to, affiliate in a party and you can still vote for whoever you want to, then who cares? You'll be able to do that in the general election anyway. But if you're required in your state to register as a Democrat in order to vote for Democrats, and you want to vote for Bernie Sanders, you want to give him a chance, I encourage you to do that. And then come the general election, vote non-affiliated, unregister and be non-affiliated or Green or Democratic Socialist. At that point, it doesn't matter. But I think that what I want to really focus on in the last minute here is if Bernie can take Iowa and New Hampshire and a huge swath of states in Super Tuesday, you got a winner. You got maybe 4 or 5 of the people opposing him dropping off the map completely, falling out of the race. You got maybe a couple people, Joe Biden trying to challenge him on the macroeconomics of his thing if Joe Biden is, wanting to be a complete douche, and he's willing to. I believe that. But the point on it is, if Bernie can win, say 15 out of the first 22 states, all of a sudden the field empties, and then the dialogue is really no longer, it's kind of like O'Malley. O'Malley was kind of relegated to the side relatively early. Then you've got Bernie already before the nomination. You've got Bernie debating Trump, essentially, on mainstream media. And that's incredibly, he'll be called to the carpet. And a lot of people in the Republican Party will start being like, Bernie Sanders is a better human being than Donald Trump. He's actually pushing for policies that I support. And independents will start pulling back their support and energy for progressive people within the Democratic Party. So that's enough with my prognosticating. I think the main point is, please don't be so obstinate. Please don't be so bullheaded. And please see that Bernie Sanders is the same person he was in 2016, for better or for worse. The policies are there. The revolution is moving on. The economics behind the policies are there, whether he speaks to them or not. And we can actually, in 2021, we could actually have a federal job guarantee passed. Believe it. It really can happen. The Green New Deal and all of the policies that are within it can actually be passed in 2021, 2022. And sure, there could be a really heavy taxation on the, upper earners, 10 million plus and so forth. We'll see what happens with that. But the main thing on it is being realistic and getting out of your dirty diaper and stop being pissy pants about the Green Party, the Democratic Socialists, the PIP, the draft Bernie. No. You ain't gonna win shit with that. You gotta temporarily, if your state requires to, you gotta temporarily affiliate as Democrat if you want a progressive agenda to happen, if you need a progressive agenda to happen. It doesn't mean that you have to be Democrat for life. I don't really plan on it. I plan on unaffiliating the moment the nomination is secured, and I feel confident that Bernie will do it. But please consider that. And I'm not a sheepdog. I'm just like, let's be realistic. There is no one who can defeat Donald Trump other than Bernie. I don't care what the polling data says about Joe Biden. I just don't see it happening. And even if he did, do you want him to win? All right. Good luck, everybody. Let's talk more. Take care. Bye.